Berserk is often talked about as a story of rage, trauma, and brutality. But underneath the violence, it's doing something quieter and stranger. It's asking a very old question. Not is life fair, but what kind of person do you become when it isn't? That question comes from a worldview older than Christianity, older than redemption arcs, older than the idea that suffering has a reason. Berserk is built on pagan tragedy, and understanding that changes how you see everything in the story. In pre-Christian worldviews, suffering isn't a bug in the system, it is the system. The cosmos doesn't care if you're good or cruel. The gods aren't moral guardians, they're forces. Powerful, yes. Benevolent? No. Pain doesn't mean you failed, it means you exist. Modern stories tell us suffering must justify itself, that pain should lead somewhere, that if you endure long enough, meaning will arrive as a reward. But pagan worlds don't promise that. They don't ask why you suffer. They ask whether you can endure without becoming small, bitter, or false. That's the world Berserk begins in. The universe doesn't reward kindness. It doesn't punish evil consistently. It just grinds forward. And if you're crushed by it, that's not tragic in the modern sense. It's expected. This is why Berserk never treats suffering as shocking, only relentless. If you want a blueprint for Berserk, look at Greek tragedy. In Greek thought, fate, Moira, stands above gods and humans alike. You don't escape it, you meet it. Hubris isn't punished because it's immoral. It's punished because it's delusional. To ignore reality is the greatest sin. The tragic hero doesn't win, he stands. He refuses to collapse inward even when the ending is already written. That's what greatness looks like in a tragic worldview. Not victory, dignity under pressure. This is why Guts feels closer to Achilles than to a modern superhero. This greatness isn't in changing the outcome. It's in refusing to let the outcome hollow him out. Greek tragedy doesn't ask whether the hero survives. It asks whether he remains himself while facing what cannot be undone. The Romans stripped tragedy down to its core. You do not control the world, you control your response. Stoicism doesn't promise justice, it promises clarity. You don't beg fate, you don't curse it, you act well anyway. Not because it pays off, not because the universe notices, but because your actions are the only place meaning can still exist. In Berserk, this isn't a philosophy you quote. It's something you live minute by minute, sword swing by sword swing. This mindset runs straight through Berserk's early chapters, especially through Guts. Now take this one step further. Norse mythology. In Norse myth, the gods know Ragnarok will happen. They don't try to stop it. They prepare to face it well. Odin seeks knowledge knowing it won't save him. Thor kills the world serpent knowing the poison will kill him the moments later. Meaning isn't victory. Meaning is resistance with open eyes. Guts doesn't fight because he thinks he'll win. He fights because stopping would mean surrendering himself. That's Norse heroism, stripped of poetry and dropped into blood and mud. This is the space Berserk occupies. This is also why Dark Souls feel so spiritually similar. They don't ask whether life is fair. They ask whether you can stand upright in an unfair world. The God Hand are often mistaken for Christian demons. They are not. God Hand are closer to pagan gods or fate deities. They don't tempt out of malice. They reveal what people already want. They are personifications of human desire, fear and rationalization. This matters for how we understand Griffith. Griffith doesn't fall. He accepts the logic of the world as it already is. Power requires sacrifice. Meaning requires domination. Weakness must be paid for by others. That's not rebellion, that's alignment. Griffith becomes horrifying not because he chooses evil, but because he chooses coherence. A world where suffering is currency, where dreams justify bodies, where transcendence demands victims. The Godhand don't corrupt him, they simply remove his last excuses. And that is deeply pre-Christian. As Berserk progresses, something changes. We start seeing churches, prayer, holy figures, the promise of mercy and protection. But Christianity in Berserk is weak, fragmented, often false. The church can't stop evil. Sometimes it causes cruelty. Often it's blind to the real horror. Kentaro Miura isn't saying Christianity replaces paganism. He's asking a sharper question. What is missing from a world ruled only by faith and strength? Berserk doesn't mock faith. It shows what happens when faith exists without power, wisdom or courage. When prayers replace responsibility. When symbols stand where action should be. Guts is not a Christian hero, but he slowly moves away from pure pagan logic. Early Guts is about survival. Rage, revenge, strength at any cost. Later, Guts changes. Protection, companionship, responsibility for the weak. A refusal to sacrifice others for his own ascent. Guts learns that strength without restraint turns you into a monster, and restraint without strength turns you into a victim. What he builds instead is something rarer, strength that exists for others. This is crucial. Guts doesn't grow by becoming stronger. He grows by refusing to become a god. That's not a theological evolution, it's a moral one. This is the philosophical pivot of Berserk. Pagan logic says, sacrifice others to transcend suffering. Christian logic says, bear suffering so others don't have to. Griffith sacrifices the hawks, becomes divine, loses his humanity. Guts refuses sacrifice, remains mortal, gains humanity. That difference is not accidental. Miura asks what remains after pagan heroism collapses and Christian salvation fails. The answer isn't faith, it isn't victory, it's care. Standing beside someone in the dark, refusing to trade others for your own escape. Bearing what you didn't choose without pretending it's noble. Berserk doesn't promise meaning. It asks whether you'll create it anyway, and whether you'll stay human while you do.